Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll just wait one more minute and then we'll get started.
Morning, all.
Good morning.
Looks like we will not be that many people today, but that gives you an excellent opportunity to ask questions whenever there is.
Yes, perfect.
No pressure.
Well, and what's funny is when I got on this morning, we canceled our health check 3 days ago and rescheduled it. So that's what I thought this was. And when I saw your smiling faces, I went, oh yeah, I did sign up for this.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah, that's how things go. Well, I think I can start by introducing Natalie Roberts. She will, we're doing these webinars. We done that. I think people are a little bit tired of Zoom meetings after a year with this also. But you know, we keep going. We have to stay strong as long as we can. And Natalie Roberts will do a summer of Agile team health check and strategies and what tools there are, because there are different techniques here. And I think she will go through at least 3 of them. Is that correct, Natalie? 3 different
Webinars?
No, strategies.
Oh, strategies. Yes. We'll talk about 3 strategies today.
And this team health check has become increasingly popular due to that. It's so much about how do you feel as a team? How do you feel as a team, as a Scrum team, not only as a development team, also as a Scrum team, and how can you improve as a Scrum team? Because it all comes down to that you got to feel good in your team. You got to feel good. And the team members got to feel good, and they're going to feel proud of their work and so forth. So the team health check is a really good way of seeing how can we make sure the teams feel good, and what can we do to improve. And that's my 5 cents, and I will hand it over to Natalie to start the webinar.
Awesome. Thank you, Jens. And definitely thank you guys for attending this morning. I know that, as Jens mentioned, sometimes we've been webinared out here for the past few months, but one of the things that I liked, I think I saw this on social media or something, somebody posted it, that through this pandemic, if you can't say you learned something through this pandemic, through online classes or webinars or anything, then you must really not be doing much, because there have been so many opportunities for learning through this time that hopefully we're taking away some really good strategies and tools to improve personal and professional lives. So this is Scrum Training Institute's contribution to the process. We've been offering webinars now for about 6 to 8 months, and we are definitely encouraged that that the word has kind of got out and folks have been joining us. But as Jens mentioned, it's kind of starting to tail off. I think people are getting a little exhausted with it. But along that same line, we do record our webinars. So even if at some point you want to share, I'm going to record and provide the link to you guys and to anyone that signed up for it as well that was unable to attend. So this definitely, if you have to step away for a minute or miss a portion of it, it will be recorded. So let me go ahead, and speaking of that, I would ask that you guys please, even though we're a very small group and we may be able to deviate from this at various points during the webinar, in general, if you guys don't mind keeping your audio muted, just to keep background noise out, that would be helpful. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, please use chat. Jens will be monitoring chat, and also we will leave time at the end for question and answer as well. And as I mentioned, this is being recorded, so you will have an opportunity to revisit the content afterwards. Okay, so this is just a brief run through of the agenda. I'm going to take you through just an introduction to team health checks. I'll talk through what I call the best practice steps for facilitating a team health check. Again, what I talk about today can be easily modified from a timing perspective, and I'll talk about that when we get into more detail. I'll run through some methods and models that you can hopefully pull from to use with your teams. And then we'll do just a quick little exercise where you can experience a team health check from what I call a distributed format, because of course we're not co-located. So we'll run through how you could potentially run through one of these in a distributed format. So with that being said, I'm gonna kind of dive in here. And to get started, and I know we're a small group, but if you guys don't mind participating a little bit here, whoops, sorry about that. If you don't mind, in your chat window, use one word to describe the best team that you've ever been on. And I'll give you guys just a minute to kind of think about that. And in your chat window, if you don't mind, just kind of giving me a good descriptor of, the best team you've ever been on from a personal or a professional perspective. And we'll kind of talk about that as a way to springboard here. And Jens, I cannot see the chat window, so if you get some chats in there, if you don't mind letting me know what those say. I think you're on mute if you're talking.
Trusting.
Yes. Excellent. Okay, good. Anything else?
Willingness to learn.
Perfect. Those two right there, trust and learning, are excellent, right? They're if you have those as part of a team, along with things like collaboration and fun, right? That's an aspect that sometimes gets underestimated as being a pretty critical factor of successful teams. One of the things that all those descriptors have in common is that they're not always easy to measure, right? They're not quantitative factors. They're more qualitative and they're more subjective. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about today is, how to utilize strategies through a health check process where you can measure things like that and really get a sense of, as Jens mentioned, how are your teams feeling? And how do they feel about, how the outlook looks for the future? Are they feeling, really, are they in a growth mindset, or are they kind of stagnated? All of those things, we can measure with a team health check. So essentially, and before I talk a little bit more about fixed and growth mindset, which kind of leads into that, is, the team health check is essentially a self-assessment process for Agile teams who want to improve the way they work together. Now, that being said, this process can be used for any team. This does not have to be in an Agile or Scrum environment. We'll talk about specific strategies from a Scrum perspective, but they can be used with any teams, and many participants from our webinars and our classes have asked that, does it have to be in a technical environment? No, this can be in a business environment, definitely in the technical and software space, but this can be for any team that really wants to identify areas of improvement. And that kind of brings me to this next section, which is talking about fixed versus growth mindset. You know, growth mindset is something you hear a lot about in the education space now, and it really applies very much in professional life as well. It's really, you know, this idea that we can continuously improve our way of working, versus a fixed mindset where, you know, we're doing the best we can, but we have no time for growth. And fixed mindset is one of those things where, you know, we fight it, right? But so many times outside influences create a fixed mindset. You know, if you're in an environment where the pressure is so hard and just strong in your organization to meet deadlines and to, you know, to have unrealistic expectations, teams naturally can fall into this fixed mindset where they're almost in survival mode. We're doing the best we can, but we don't have any time for growth. We just don't have time to look at what makes our team tick and what we can improve on. Whereas a growth mindset is the opposite of that. You know, you're looking at continuously improving your way of working. Now, much of this whole mindset or movement from a fixed to growth mindset has to be from an organizational perspective too, right? So it's one thing for the team to want this and to be working toward it, but obviously the hope would be that you would have support from an organizational perspective as well. They go hand in hand. And that, you know, isn't always an easy thing to accomplish, but again, it has to start somewhere. So if it starts at the team level, hey, that is a starting point. So again, this growth mindset, in order to have this, a team really must make the time and the space for that intentional growth or that intentional movement toward continuous improvement. So really, you could argue that even attending a webinar like this, if your organization or your teams don't have this and you feel like there's a need for it, then this is kind of your first step, right? You're attending this webinar to learn more about it, and then you begin to take those steps forward. So again, the overall goal here is to encourage continuous improvement. One of the things to remember too about a team health check is that the benefit is for the team. And it should always be used to support the team, not judge the performance of a team or to judge, you know, feelings, right? So with that being said, it must be in an environment that ensures honesty. And that, if you're getting started with this, is one thing that you really have to take a look at. If you're a Scrum Master or an Agile coach or someone in that role where you could be facilitating a team health check, you want to be sure that you've got an environment that's going to ensure honesty, or at least be working toward that. Now, we're going to talk about different models today, but you can run team health checks in an anonymous or a non-anonymous format. And some of the decision making behind which one you choose will depend on that level of honesty that exists in your organization or on your teams. Do your team members feel comfortable providing feedback? It's that idea of psychological safety. Is there already an environment of safety? Or if there isn't, you know, maybe we start with anonymous feedback and kind of work from there. So that's one of the factors that we'll talk about today as well. The timing of a team health check will vary, again, depending on the structure that you've got in place and also you know, where your teams are at with this. If you're just getting started with this, some teams have tried using some of the strategies during the sprint retrospective. that might be a time where you can build in some assessment items for team health. When you get into a more formalized team health check, usually a quarterly team health check is a good timing. A lot of organizations utilize that timing. Or sometimes, and these are obviously for much more mature organizations, maybe a semi-annual 6-month basis as well. And again, it's going to depend on kind of your individual situation. As I mentioned, there's various methods and tools that are available for team health checks. And again, we'll talk about a few, but there's lots of different options out there. And sometimes you'll find that you may take pieces from different ones and kind of build your own as well. So we'll talk about that. So before I talk about some of the tools, I want to talk about facilitating a team health check. And there's a few things. This may kind of seem pretty basic when we talk about it, and it is. It's designed to be. A team health check in general should be a very easy process. In other words, you don't want to make it complicated. You don't want the team to feel like it's a complicated process. And if you're the one facilitating, of course, you don't want it to be a complicated process. And you want the team to be engaged in it. So keeping it as simple as possible should be your goal. That being said, there's a few basic steps that you want to be sure that you incorporate into your health check. And when I talk about the time box here, I want to talk about the time box as a formal team health check, meaning maybe one that you do quarterly or semi-annually. That because a 2 to 3 hour health check is not always possible for everybody. So keep that in mind, that while I'm talking about it from a 2 to 3 hour time box, you can certainly take a team health check and have it be a much shorter process. And really a lot of the steps that we talk about, you can already see ways that you can shorten it or take pieces of it that could then fit into, say, a sprint retrospective. However, no matter what time box you're going to use, you do need to have these 4 steps. You need to, of course, be able to introduce and explain the purpose of the team health check, which in reality should happen even before the team health check occurs. You want to build in time for a brief assessment. You want to build in time for analysis and debrief, and you want to build in time for analyzing and building growth and actionable items from the health check. So you really need to have all 4 of these steps for it to be considered a true and value added exercise. And again, I'm going to talk about each of these steps in a little more detail before we talk about the different models that you can use for these. So we'll talk about each of these steps now. So for the introduction and explanation, this again, if you're talking about a 2 to 3 hour time box, this should be very short because your team or teams should already be very familiar with the idea of a team health check and why they're participating in this. But you always want to have this time to set norms, review your agenda, talk through the logistics of the team health check, and keeping in mind that this process, whether you are in a co-located or a distributed environment, should take place all together. So in other words, your introduction should take place as part of the workshop, we'll call it a workshop, as a whole. And if you're in a distributed environment, of course, you can accomplish that through Zoom or some other type of collaboration environment that you have. But you really want to have everyone face to face. So if you are distributed, something like Zoom is a great tool to use, obviously. And if you're co-located, obviously, you would all be in the same room together. So you'll talk through the logistics. If you've got multiple teams, You likely are going to want to allow for the capability of breakout sessions during the analysis and debrief portion, because you are going to be drilling down into detail into some of the assessment items that come out of that portion of the workshop. So again, this is just your introduction to the logistics and how all this is going to work, making sure everybody can log in and see. And that's another thing as well that we'll talk about, is that a health check should always be a very visual process. The assessment should be visual, the results should be visual. And again, making it as simple as possible as well. All right, the second step in the process is the assessment. So this is the portion of the team health check where a few things. You want to definitely administer it all at one time, ideally in a co-located environment, which I find myself saying this a lot, which is I understand that a lot of organizations are still in a distributed environment, and that's definitely, or maybe permanently in a distributed environment. So hopefully you can modify much of what we talk about today into fitting needs of a distributed environment as well. One of the points I want to make about that is if you are in a distributed environment, you still want to administer the assessment all at the same time. And that's critical. I like to use the example of when I used to work in public education. We had a scenario every year where we would receive a link to what they called a climate survey, which, you know, and a lot of similarities to something on a team health check assessment, where you really provided feedback on a lot of those intangibles and those cultural aspects of your environment and your school and your overall work. And we would receive a link to the assessment a month ahead of time. And then we would receive it through email. And in the email, it would say, okay, 1 month from now, we will come together and we will debrief and run breakouts on some of the results that came about from the assessment. Well, what do you think happens in that month time frame? Everybody gossips about it. Everybody, you know, talks about it. Oh, how did you answer this question? What kind of feedback did you provide? Oh, I really gave it to them on this one. There's just so much discussion and, you know, bias that gets built in through that month time frame, that it loses a lot of its effectiveness, and it can cause demotivation as well. So two things with that. You want to keep it as a short assessment, and you want to do it all at the same time. If you're co-located, of course, this makes it easy because you're all in the same room together. And if you're going to utilize one of the models that we'll talk about in a little bit, you will physically be utilizing the assessment right in front of each other. If you're in that type of environment where non-anonymous feedback will work. So again, whether you're doing an anonymous assessment or non-anonymous, you want to try to do it all at the same time. You want to make it visual and easy to understand. That is so critical. And again, you want to ensure safety and anonymity if that is a requirement based on your team's psychological safety or feelings of psychological safety. I've got a time box of 30 to 40 minutes on this. That's a lot. That's a long time. You should really not, even if you're using the 2 to 3 hour time box for your health check, you don't want the assessment any longer than this. And this is even on the long side. Because you don't want your team to lose interest, feel like, oh gosh, another assessment. And, you know, it really can get to be demotivating for the team if it's too long of an assessment. So keep that in mind as well. The one we're going to do today is less than 5 minutes. And you really, especially if you're first starting out, you can easily run an assessment in 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. Okay. So after you run the assessment, you then want to provide the opportunity for debrief, analysis and debrief. So this, when you're facilitating a team health check, this kind of takes on two different parts, where you of course want to be able to provide a summary of the data. And you want to do this in a way where if you're facilitating, you want to don't present it as in you're telling the team this is the result. You want to ask, what do they see? Everyone has a voice in this process. Your team, and I haven't mentioned this, but I do want to mention, if you are running a Scrum framework, that you want to have the entire Scrum team participate in this process. So not just the dev team. So it's your dev team, Scrum Master, and product owner that would all participate in each part of the team health check. Everyone has a voice. And if you have other key stakeholders that you feel should be part of the process, by all means. So during this summary debrief, you as the facilitator are presenting a summary level result. And then you want to allow time for the team or teams to have a more granular level discussion about what they see and what they, their assessments and how they felt about the results. So this is where your team is going to discuss improvement areas and in some cases, more importantly, misalignments, where there's like a very big disparity between, how some of the metrics or health metrics were measured. And then also, of course, this is where the team then begins to identify and capture strengths and improvement areas, because the next step is an extremely critical part of the process, which is building the growth plan. So again, this is a critical component of moving from that fixed mindset to growth mindset. It's one thing to do an assessment and look at the results and even analyze the results, but if you don't build improvement items from that, then you've lost the value add of a team health check. You've got to really allow for time to build the growth plan. So there's not a set or structured template with building growth items. SMART goal structure is a great starting point for that. And I'll talk a little bit about SMART goal structure in a minute. But the key here is that you really don't want to run out of time or neglect to build your growth plan. If you are running Scrum, the Scrum Master becomes then the owner of the growth plan items. However, the team as a whole works those growth plan items. So while the facilitator or the Scrum Master kind of owns the backlog for these items, the team works the items. And, depending on the items that you build from this, the Scrum Master may pull items from the growth plan into sprint planning when it makes sense. Again, this is the team as a whole. The Scrum Master may facilitate this process, but it's really the team as a whole that decides on that. Like good user stories, if you're utilizing user stories, growth plan items are well defined and have acceptance criteria built into them as well. And again, a SMART goal structure is one way to accomplish that, meaning a SMART goal is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And we've built in an example right here. So and this is just a sample that may come as a result of a team health check. So as a team, we would like our product owner to improve the communication of our upcoming roadmap so that we can plan ahead and better understand the vision of where we're going. Acceptance criteria for this goal are: 1, build a roadmap for Q2 and Q3. 2, Share the roadmap with the team and get feedback. And 3, keep the roadmap in a visible area. Again, this is just a sample to show you the specificity, you know, the measurable components of it, the time-based, and of course, very important, the attainable aspect of it as well. So that's something that may come out of the debrief that your team, you know, runs after the assessment portion of the team health check. Okay, before we get into methods, models, and tools, I did want to take a short break to let you guys know that Scrum Training Institute does run a one-day workshop for Team Health Check. And we have one coming up in January 28th, 2021 already. I can't believe it's going to be a new year already. The one-day course is $395, and you know, please check it out if you are interested. Our website has additional details on that, and I can also answer questions at the end of the webinar today if you're interested in some more details on that course. But just wanted to give a little plug for our one-day course that we offer.
So
okay.
we might, sorry, Natalie, I know Jim is from Denmark, so we might say that we're doing one with Trifork also in February.
Yes, and actually, I should have added that on there, Jens, and we'll give a little more detail on that at the end.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. Perfect. Okay, so now I want to take a few minutes to go over some of the different kind of tools that
Natalie, there's a question.
Okay.
Will we receive a formal invite from you all via email?
For the course?
You mean for the course, Anne? Yes.
Yes, as part of when I send out the recording, I'll also send a link directly to the registration for the course, and also some additional information about it as well, along with some resources and things that we talk about in the webinar. So you guys will get all that through email.
Okay, I will then forward that to all the Scrum Masters and product owners in our organization.
Perfect. That's great. Awesome. Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, I have a couple questions as well regarding this first part. So you mentioned creating a summary report of who gets that summary report. Is that for the team, or is that for the stakeholders, or can the management order this and then those get rolled up, or how does that work?
So that's a great question, and that's almost always a question that I get because really, you know, even though we say and want the health check process to be 100% for the team. So that summary that I was speaking of is for the team as part of the workshop, as running the health check. That being said, we also know the reality. A lot of times if your organization is supporting you in this process, they want to kind of see something as well, right? So that's where, if you as the Scrum Master or Agile coach or whoever is facilitating is kind of responsible for that, absolutely you want to loop in your stakeholders however you see as appropriate. However, it is really important that your organization and those levels understand that this process is to support the team, not to judge the team. So you want to really be sure that you have level setting before they receive any kind of summary or report that comes out of the health check. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And I think it goes towards, you know, maybe making sure that it's anonymous or a name. So I think that's good. And then one other question, a quick question I had was, so you mentioned the goal setting. You had the example there about the PO doing more communication and the roadmap. Do you have experience that you should also include the why behind it, or what benefits are they going to get out of it?
So as far as the action items, the growth
Yeah,
items,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, absolutely. I would say that should always definitely be part of the discussion when those items are being built.
yeah,
And remember, it's the team building these, right?
yeah, yeah.
So the hope would be that that discussion is occurring as they're building them. But absolutely,
Okay.
you want to have the whys, because of course, you know, that there's not much motivation in moving forward if on anything if you don't understand the why, right? Cool. Good. Um, Okay, so right now I want to talk about a few different tools and strategies that you guys can utilize as part of a team health check. And again, I'm going to kind of start out from very simple and kind of move up in complexity and kind of ease of implementation. So I'll move from easy into a little bit more complex, because everybody's at a different stage in the process. The first strategy that I want to talk about is called a happiness store. And this is super simple to implement. And it's a great way to kind of introduce health checks to your team. So if you're in an environment where, you know, you really want, you're starting from square one, and you know that this is something that can really benefit the team, but you are not sure really where the team is at, or maybe there's not a feedback habit built in to your teams, it's a great way to kind of introduce the concept. It's a mix of, you know, agile practices of the feedback wall and the happiness index. So it's a great way to build in fast feedback and build what's called a feedback habit. Um, so when you are implementing the happiness store, again, this is ideal in a co-located environment because you can literally use a door or a wall. When you're co-located, you have a lot of those options to be very, you know, engaging with your physical environment. But you can do this in a distributed environment as well. There's lots of tools out there that allow you to build virtual happiness stores as well. Tools like Miro and Mural that are great examples that you can still do this. So how does it work? So essentially, you during a meeting, you can, or any particular session, you can maybe start with, you know, with one of, if you're running Scrum, maybe with one of your sprint planning sessions or something along that line. You can ask the team to be recording, you know, what are their thoughts on the topic or the project that you guys are working on. Ask them to note their feedback on a Post-it note, and stick it on the happiness store. When we look at physical examples of this, this is literally a door. The one example shown here, and it's a great way to get some quick visual feedback on a particular meeting or a project or something that the team is working on. Now, the nice thing about a happiness store is the feedback on the happiness store is immediately actionable. However, you're not going to get necessarily scientific results from this. So you can capture those results. And if you're running it in a workshop format, you can definitely debrief and build growth items from this. But when you're building growth items, one thing to remember is that you're going to want to build on those growth items. So by nature, you're going to then want to run another happiness store a month later, however, you know, 2 weeks later, maybe after the sprint, to see how you're doing on those actionable growth items. So while happiness store makes it a little bit difficult to do that, it's not impossible. And if you're doing it in a collaborative environment using Miro or Mural, it's maybe a little bit easier to capture those items. So the other example I have there is just showing, again, a very visual board where you want to use something that's very easy. If you're using Post-it notes, use different colors of Post-it notes, or you can use emojis. Anytime you can use color coding or emoticons and things like that, you're able to get a much quicker visual result. You know, I always tell folks that if you're running an assessment where you're giving someone even, you know, 10 choices on an answer, you know, rank from 1 to 10, you're going to run into areas where, again, it becomes a little demotivating. If you're answering 50 questions and ranking 1 through 10 on each of those, the team's going to get kind of frustrated with that. They're going to be like, look, can't I just say, give it a 1, 2, or 3, or red, yellow, green, or something along that line, to get to have them not have to think so much about how they're assessing. So anytime you can use visuals, color coding, emoticons, it's definitely advantageous. So so this is, again, super simple to implement. You know, this, if you're starting out with baby steps, this is a way that you can start that process. And again, it's kind of building a feedback habit. Okay, so the next example becomes a little bit more advanced. I would say that the Spotify squad check model is easy to intermediate to implement. The cost is free, which is great. Same with the happiness store. That one is free to implement, and you didn't even need any technology to run it. Same thing with Spotify. And Spotify is the music download company that we're going to, they've released this model, very, very excellent model for more advanced Agile or Scrum environments. So I'm going to talk about how Spotify utilizes what we will call Agile team health checks in a more advanced way. But then elements of that can be utilized in an easier to implement format as well. So Spotify utilizes what they call a squad check, and the squad is Spotify's term for their small cross-functional self-organizing teams. And again, they're a very mature Scrum Agile environment. So some of these you may look at it and be like, oh my gosh, we could never do that in my organization. Well, maybe not to the level that Spotify does, but you can definitely take elements of that and apply it within your organization. So their squad checks are run for the squad and for the people supporting the squad, which again is critical to build that in. So if you're running Scrum, that's your entire Scrum team. And if there's other stakeholders that you feel like should be a part of that, by all means include them. The Spotify model is predicated on being in a co-located environment because they actually do utilize physical decks of cards to run their squad checks. So if you've ever utilized planning poker with physical decks of cards, that's similar to how Spotify runs their workshops for health checks. This, again, is not going to work for everybody, because if you're not co-located, you won't be able to utilize it in the way that Spotify does. However, if you are co-located, I encourage you to try something like this. If your teams are at that stage where they feel comfortable providing feedback non-anonymously. So there's those two components, co-location and non-anonymous, to run the squad check as you would under the Spotify model. So Spotify provides this model free to download. So you can take their card templates and build them to meet your needs for your organization. There's two pieces to the cards. Each team member or squad member receives a set of stoplight cards, red, yellow, and green, where green is awesome, yellow is just so-so, and red needs improvement. And then the other set of cards that are used by the facilitator, which if you're running Scrum is likely going to be the Scrum Master, but doesn't have to be. The Scrum Master will have a set of health indicator cards. And these are broken down into 11 health indicators that Spotify has determined meets their needs. This does not mean you would utilize all of these for your organization, and you maybe want to use different ones. There's no rule saying you have to use these health indicators, but they kind of run along the line of what we were talking about earlier. A lot of cultural aspects to the team, rating things like teamwork, learning, is the team having fun, and then some more performative values as well, things like delivering value, where the example here provides an example of what it means to be green. So we deliver great stuff, we're proud of it, and our stakeholders are really happy. And then what it means to be in the red zone. We do not deliver value to our stakeholders, and we feel ashamed of our work. And I always say, I hope no one feels ashamed of their work, but it is something that provides level setting when you're running the assessment. So you have green and red explained on the health indicator cards, and then yellow is just somewhere in between. So their health indicators are listed there. Again, this is more for a software development technical environment, because you've got indicators for release and health of code base. But by all means, these do not have to be used in every environment. So you can modify the health metrics to meet your needs. So how the Spotify Squad Check works is Spotify runs their workshops where members of the squad discuss and assess their current situation based on those health indicators. And if you're in a co-located physical environment, team members will hold up the card based on how they feel about the health indicator, and everyone throws down the card at the same time. So again, there's hopefully no bias built in. Again, that's in a very safe environment. Not all teams will feel safe to put down an honest assessment using those cards. That's where you can then build in the metrics of the Spotify Squad Check, but you can build an anonymous form or assessment for that, which is what we're going to run as part of the exercise in a little bit. And then Spotify runs a visual summary of the results, and then the squad discusses the trends, and then they use the data to build those growth items that we talked about. So they run the workshop with those 4 steps that we talked about earlier. Some of the visual summaries that that may result from this, if you have a one squad or one team structure, example 1 shows literally how you can just manually run this with no technology. So you have kind of a hash or a dot vote method for green, yellow, and red, and then the different health metrics that are being voted on. So the facilitator may be the one tabulating, or someone else on the squad may be the one who's tabulating the results. Again, this is in the Spotify environment that's being run in a co-located, non-anonymous format. So you see the example number 1 has a number of the metrics there. And when you have it very visual like this, you can see trends right away, which is ideally what you want the team to be focused on, right? What are some misalignments? What are some success areas? What are some immediate improvement areas? You look at teamwork right away, you see you've got 4 in the red, and then you've got 1 in the green and 1 in the yellow. So that's an immediate area of discussion where the team can really begin to dig into, you know, again, a lot of those whys and why do they feel the way they do? And then of course, what can we do to work on improving teamwork? Also looking at, you know, misalignments. You even look at fun. You've got 2 in the green, 1 in the yellow, 4 in the red. Well, why is there a misalignment there? You know, have a discussion about that. Also areas like process where you have a good amount in the yellow. That's definitely an improvement area where everyone feels like, it's just, our processes are just okay, but there's obviously room for improvement. And then the second visual example is for a multi-squad or multi-team environment where it's a little bit more expanded. And you're looking at, in the case of Spotify, this is one of their exact examples where you've got 7 squads listed, and then where they are on all of the different health metrics. And again, you can visually see right away some areas that that can be discussed and honed in on. You look at squad 2 and you see a lot of yellows and reds. That could mean a lot of different things, though. That, again, which is why it's so important that this process is used to support teams and not judge, because squad 2 might be a very young squad. Maybe they're just getting together and they're still just finding their way. That doesn't mean they're bad and doing a bad job. It just means that they're, you know, they're working on things and they're figuring things out. Spotify adds an additional element to theirs where they add the up and down arrow as well to help in determining trends. So you see squad 2, they're yellow and red on a lot of metrics, but they're trending up, which is a great sign. And then you look at squad 4 where they're yellow, or they're green and yellow on everything, but they're even trending up in their green areas. So that's likely a very mature team. They've been together a while. They're running as kind of that well-oiled machine. So again, this is where, okay, you can decide to run breakouts on this. You know, let's share. What is squad 4 doing that has allowed them to kind of get to this stage that then they can share and help squad 2, or help some, you know, help build in improvement items that will help get squad 2 to those green and yellow areas as well. So hopefully the takeaway from this is that it's a very visual process, and it's again, it's a way to kind of be that springboard for further discussion. Okay, I'm going to talk really briefly about agility health. This is one that we go into a lot more detail during the workshop. This is a more intermediate to complex health metric or health check, and it is a paid subscription plan. And there are programs out there that are paid subscriptions that allow members of your team and organization to actually become certified health facilitators. And it's a nice process to look at if you are in one of those more mature organizations where maybe you've been running health checks for a while and you want something a little more formalized. Agility Health might be an option that you look at, or something similar. They run their assessments and results of the assessments a little bit more complex, and they're run as team health radars. So you see the results in a radar format, and they run their assessment on key components like leadership, culture, foundation, clarity, and really drill down into a lot more detail on each of those. Their assessments are quite a bit longer. They're about 50 questions and generally do take about 20 to 30 minutes to complete for a team. Again, a little bit more complex, and you actually want to have your facilitators go through the agility health training to become a certified facilitator to run these health checks. And they are all done, those are online assessments as well. So while you are still encouraged to run these in a co-located environment and run them all together as a workshop, the assessment itself is an anonymous online assessment. Okay, so we're rapidly running out of time here. So I want to provide you guys an opportunity to experience a team health check. So what I did was I built a distributed style assessment using the Spotify model. And all I did was build it in Google Forms. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to actually experience the assessment. And I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to do it because we're running out of time. And then I want to show you, what it looks like to look at the results of the assessment. So I'm going to stop sharing very quickly. And in chat, I sent you a link to the Google form. All of you, if you're able to click on that and run through, just keep in mind, answer the questions based on your team. Okay, Jens, you had a question? You're on mute.
It's from Ann. I'm not able to get to Google Forms because of firewall issues as I work for the defense industry in the US.
Okay, that's fine. And, just maybe you'll get the link in the email as well, that maybe you can try it at home. But I will just I'll share my screen with the results so you can at least see the results. And it's not a big deal that you're not able to complete it. So I'm going to give you guys, those of you that can do it, I'll give you guys just a couple of minutes, and then I will show you the results.
And Jim, understand this will be totally anonymous.
That's okay. That's okay. I think we are. It's just us four, right? Even though the people on, the team I'm working with, they're not part of this anyway. So, and it's not even them. It's not even them. So,
and just so you know, the assessment, and for purposes of the webinar, this is not scientific by any means. We actually layer the responses on over a class and over a webinar. So this is not going to be responses of just one person. This will show yours will get kind of thrown in there with about 100 other people. So don't worry about that.
This has given me some ideas, though, outside of my Scrum team, with areas in the business. As we have new leadership, I think we could build some baselines for that new leadership of where it was when they came, and then watch this quarterly and see if even the non-agile teams improvement. So thank you for some of the thoughts. Give me some insight in other areas.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share again. I know we're a little pressed for time here, but just to kind of give you an idea. And again, I built this in Google Forms. You by no means have to use Google to do this. There's lots of assessment builders out there that you could do this with. I just did this to show that really you don't need any special technical ability to do it. I built it using Google Forms. If you did get a chance to complete it, you saw that it was very visual. I used the green, yellow, red that Spotify uses. And I use the green, yellow, red in the results as well. So as you see here, I just built bar charts for each metric. And as you can see, there's multiple responses built in here. And it's been actually kind of interesting doing this over the course of many webinars and classes, that I always ask folks, think about your team back in your organization when you're answering this. And it's kind of cool because you see trends develop over the, looking at various organizations and different, people in different roles and things like that. And you definitely see trends, which is cool. So again, it's very visual. You can see very quickly, like for those that answered the question about health of code base, this one is always one where you've got a lot of yellow here. So people feel okay about their code, but they can always find room for improvement as well. So I always like to use that one as an example, because it's always a big discussion item during our Scrum Master and Product Owner classes as well. And learning, It's great to see so many teams feel like they are learning, which is very encouraging. They've got a lot in the green there and a lot in the yellow, but not many in the red, which is great to see. So you can get a really good visual of where teams are. Teamwork and support is another one that I love to see, all the green there. And you can make this, again, this shows where you can utilize the Spotify model, but use it in an anonymous format and a distributed format. So you can use a lot of pull from a lot of the strategies they utilize, and build in, you know, the issue or the situation that best meets your needs. I know, Anne, you were mentioning you're thinking of utilizing this in a more business environment, and absolutely. And you're going to have different metrics that you probably want to build in, different health metrics.
Yes.
So that definitely is pertinent, and the model allows for that flexibility. So in summary, and I know we're cutting it short here a little bit, but just, you know, a couple things to remember is always have the team health check be, the purpose is to support the team. Again, we know we will have to provide some level of reporting back to upper management or to stakeholders, and that's fine as long as there's level setting there, and that the organization and stakeholders understand that in order for the teams to feel honest and feel good about the process, they need to feel that the health check is being used to support them and not to judge them. And again, involve the team in the process of deciding a model or tool to use. Definitely, that's a key component as well. And just please make sure that you build in time to build growth items and to follow up on those growth items. That's why no matter what timing you choose, whether it's you know, quarterly, semi-annually, that it's consistent, so that there's that same amount of time in between to actually build on those growth items and to show that continuous improvement. Okay. Oh, I was going to mention, let me go